The wedding guests gasped as Caitlyn stood alone at the altar, her white dress pristine against the cathedral's grandeur, clutching a crumpled note that would shatter her world. "He's not coming," she whispered, her engagement ring falling from trembling fingers onto cold marble. 20 years later, that same woman would command a billion-dollar empire from the bridge of her flagship vessel, while the man who abandoned her watched from the crowd below, realizing too late what he'd lost. Welcome to a story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph. Comment your city below to see how far this journey reaches, and stay until the end, because revenge is best served at sea. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the modest apartment in Boston's South End, casting delicate shadows across Caitlyn Ramsey's face as she sat before her vanity mirror. Her fingers trembled slightly as she applied the final touches of mascara, careful not to smudge the makeup that had taken her cousin Sarah 2 hours to perfect. Today was supposed to be the beginning of everything: her wedding day, her ascension into the Holt family dynasty, her escape from a lifetime of struggle. "You look absolutely radiant," Sarah said, adjusting the cathedral-length veil that had belonged to Caitlyn's late mother. "Damien won't be able to take his eyes off you." Caitlyn managed a nervous smile, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. 3 weeks. She'd known for 3 weeks about the life growing inside her, but she'd kept the secret, close planning to tell Damien on their honeymoon in the Maldives. It would be the perfect moment, just the two of them, away from his overbearing mother Victoria and the suffocating expectations of Boston society. "Do you think she'll ever accept me?" Caitlyn asked, suddenly meeting Sarah's eyes in the mirror. Sarah's hands stilled on the veil. "Victoria Holt. She barely spoke to me at the rehearsal dinner. Just kept staring at me like I was something she'd scraped off her Louboutin heel." "Hey," Sarah said firmly, turning Caitlyn to face her. "You're marrying Damien, not his mother. And that man is crazy about you. I've seen the way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars just for him." Caitlyn wanted to believe it. God, how she wanted to believe it. She thought back to how they'd met 18 months ago at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, where she'd been working as a banquet server to pay for her hospitality management courses at community college. Damien had been attending some charity gala, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, clearly bored out of his mind as various society matrons paraded their daughters before him. Their collision had been literal, Caitlyn carrying a tray of champagne, Damien turning without looking, resulting in a spectacular crash that left them both drenched in Dom Perignon. While everyone else gasped in horror, Damien had laughed a genuine, delighted laugh that transformed his face from coldly handsome to breathtakingly beautiful. "I'm so sorry," she'd stammered, dropping to her knees to collect the scattered glasses, her face burning with embarrassment. "Don't be," he'd said, kneeling beside her, ruining his $1,000 tuxedo pants without hesitation. "This is the most interesting thing that's happened all evening. I'm Damien." "I know who you are," she'd replied before she could stop herself. Everyone in Boston knew the Holt family, real estate moguls who owned half the city's skyline. "But I don't know who you are," he'd said, his green eyes twinkling with interest. "And that seems like a terrible oversight on my part." "Caitlyn," she'd whispered. "Caitlyn Ramsey." "Well, Caitlyn Ramsey, how about we get out of here and find somewhere to dry off? I know a place that serves the best late-night pancakes in Boston." She should have said no. Should have remembered her place, remembered that girls like her didn't go for pancakes with boys like him. But something in his smile, in the way he helped her to her feet, with such genuine kindness, made her throw caution to the wind. "I could lose my job," she'd said. "Then I'll hire you," he'd replied without missing a beat. "I've been looking for someone to teach me how to carry champagne trays without causing natural disasters." That night, at the 24-hour diner in Allston, They'd talked until sunrise. He'd been fascinated by her stories of growing up in foster care, after her mother's death, of working 3 jobs to pay for college, of her dreams of someday running her own hospitality empire. She'd been equally entranced by his unexpected vulnerability, the way he opened up about feeling trapped by his family's expectations, his secret desire to be more than just another Holt heir. "You're different," he'd said, as the sun painted the sky pink and gold outside the diner windows. "You're real. Everyone in my world is playing a part wearing a mask. But you're just yourself." "Is that a good thing?" she'd asked. "It's everything," he'd replied, taking her hand across the sticky Formica table. The memory faded as Sarah finished securing the veil with her mother's pearl hairpins. A knock at the door made them both jump. "That'll be your dad," Sarah said, meaning her own father, Uncle Robert, who'd agreed to walk Caitlyn down the aisle. The closest thing to family she had left. But when Sarah opened the door, it wasn't Robert standing there. It was Marcus Chen, Damien's best man, and his face was pale as parchment. "Marcus!" Caitlyn stood, her dress rustling around her. "What are you doing here? You should be with Damien at the church." Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. His hands shook as he extended an envelope toward her. "I'm so sorry, Caitlyn. I tried to talk him out of it. I swear to God I tried." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Caitlyn took the envelope. Her name was written across it, in Damien's distinctive handwriting. Inside, she found a single sheet of his monogrammed stationery, and her engagement ring, the 3-carat diamond that had belonged to his grandmother. Her eyes scanned the words, but her brain refused to process them. "Caitlyn, I can't do this. I thought I was strong enough to stand up to my family, to choose love over duty, but I'm not. Last night my mother made it clear that if I marry you, I'll be disowned, cut off completely. No trust fund, no position at Holt Industries, no future. I told myself I didn't care that you were worth it, but I woke up this morning and realized I'm not the man you thought I was. I'm weak. I'm a coward. You deserve someone who would choose you over everything without hesitation. Someone brave enough to build a life from nothing with you. I'm not that man. I never was. My family's lawyers will send papers. The apartment is paid through the end of the month. There's money in the account we opened enough to start over somewhere else. Please don't try to contact me. It will only make this harder. I'm sorry. You deserved better." Damien, the letter slipped from her numb fingers, floating to the floor like a fallen leaf. Sarah snatched it up, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. "That bastard!" she snarled. "That absolute bastard! How dare he on your wedding day? I'll kill him! I'll actually kill him!" But Caitlyn couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She stood frozen in her wedding dress, a statue of abandoned dreams, while the world crashed down around her. "Caitlyn." Marcus stepped forward hesitantly. "The guests. They're already at the church. What should I tell them?" She looked at him, then really looked at him and saw the pity in his eyes. Poor little Caitlyn Ramsey, who'd dared to reach above her station. Who'd actually believed a Holt could love someone like her. "Tell them the truth," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Tell them Damien Holt is a coward who chose money over love. Tell them the wedding is off." "Caitlyn, get out," she said quietly. Then louder, "Get out." Marcus fled, leaving Caitlyn and Sarah alone in the apartment that would only be hers for 30 more days. Caitlyn walked to the window, looking down at the street where a white Rolls-Royce waited to take her to the church. The driver stood beside it, checking his watch, unaware that his services were no longer needed. "Honey," Sarah said, gently approaching her like she might spook. "Talk to me. Say something." Caitlyn's hand moved to her stomach again. The secret she'd been carrying suddenly felt like a boulder on her chest. She turned to her cousin, and finally the dam broke. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, and then she was sobbing, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. "I'm pregnant, Sarah, and he doesn't even know. Oh God, what am I going to do?" Sarah caught her as her knees buckled, both of them sinking to the floor in a puddle of white satin and tulle. They stayed there as the morning turned to afternoon, as the phone rang incessantly with calls from confused guests, as Caitlyn's carefully constructed future crumbled to dust. By evening, word had spread through Boston society like wildfire. Victoria Holt, it seemed, had wasted no time in controlling the narrative. The story being told in the exclusive clubs and charity luncheons was that Damien had discovered his fiancée was a gold digger, possibly involved with another man, and had barely escaped her clutches in time. The Holt family PR machine was efficient and merciless. Caitlyn sat in the dark apartment, still in her wedding dress, scrolling through her phone as the messages poured in. Her boss at the hotel had already texted to inform her that her services were no longer required. The Holts were major shareholders, after all. Her landlord called to remind her that the lease was in Damien's name, and she would need to be out by the end of the month. Even the community college called to inform her that the anonymous scholarship that had been paying her tuition had been withdrawn. "They're erasing me," she said numbly to Sarah, who had refused to leave her side. "Everything I had, everything was building it, was all connected to him. And now they're just erasing me from existence." "We won't let them," Sarah said fiercely. "You'll stay with me and Dad. We'll figure this out." But Caitlyn knew the truth. Sarah was barely making ends meet herself, living in a studio apartment and working as a kindergarten teacher. Uncle Robert was on disability after a construction accident. They couldn't take her in, especially not with a baby on the way. That night, after Sarah finally left with promises to return in the morning, Caitlyn sat at the kitchen table where she and Damien had shared so many meals, planned so many dreams. She pulled out a notebook and began to write. At the top of the page, she wrote, "Survival Plan." Under it, she listed her assets, $3,000 in savings. She'd refused to touch the money Damien mentioned in his letter. She'd rather starve than take his guilt money. Her mother's pearl hairpins. A bachelor's degree in hospitality that was worthless without experience or connections. The wedding dress she could maybe sell. Her pride wounded, but not dead. Her challenges filled 3 pages, no job, no home in 30 days, no health insurance, pregnant, alone, blacklisted from every decent hotel and restaurant in Boston thanks to the Holt influence. She stared at the lists until her vision blurred. Then, at the bottom of the page, she wrote in capital letters, "This is not the end." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of humiliation and closed doors. Every job application was rejected, sometimes within hours. It became clear that Victoria Holt's reach extended far beyond what Caitlyn had imagined. She was being professionally assassinated, methodically and thoroughly. On the last day of the month, with her belongings packed into 2 suitcases and nowhere to go, Caitlyn stood in the empty apartment one final time. The morning sickness had started a week ago, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her. She'd sold the wedding dress for a fraction of what it cost. Sold her laptop, sold everything that wasn't essential. A knock at the door interrupted her goodbye. She opened it to find Victoria Holt herself, dressed in an impeccable Chanel suit. Her silver hair perfectly coiffed her expression, as cold as January in Boston. "Mrs. Holt," Caitlyn said, too exhausted for surprise. "May I come in?" Victoria asked, though she was already stepping past Caitlyn into the apartment. She looked around the empty space with satisfaction. "I see you're leaving. Good." "Did you come to gloat?" Caitlyn asked. "I came to ensure there are no misunderstandings," Victoria replied, turning to face her with eyes like chips of ocho ice. "You are to have no contact with my son. You are to make no claims on the Holt family. You are to absentir from Boston society as if you never existed. In return, I won't pursue legal action for the emotional distress you've caused my family." "Emotional distress?" Caitlyn laughed bitterly. "I was left at the altar, publicly humiliated, fired from my job, evicted from my home. And you think I caused emotional distress?" Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "You should be grateful, girl. I could have destroyed you completely. This way you get to start over somewhere else, somewhere more appropriate for someone of your background." "My background," Caitlyn repeated. "You mean poor?" "I mean unsuitable," Victoria corrected. "You were a pretty distraction for Damien, nothing more. Did you really think you could join our family, attend charity galas and country club luncheons, make small talk with senators and CEOs? You can barely hold a champagne tray steady." The reference to how she'd met Damien felt like a slap. Caitlyn's hand moved involuntarily to her stomach, and she saw Victoria's eyes track the movement, saw them narrow with sudden suspicion. "You're not," Victoria began. "No," Caitlyn lied quickly. "I'm not." Victoria studied her for a long moment, then seemed to accept the lie. "Good. That would have been inconvenient." She moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, Miss Ramsey. Know your place. It will save you a great deal of heartache in the future." After she left, Caitlyn sank onto the floor, her back against the wall. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to Damien's number. Her thumb hovered over it for a long moment. One call. One text telling him about the baby. Would it change everything? Would he come back? But then she remembered his words. "I'm weak, I'm a coward." Did she really want a coward raising her child? Did she want her baby growing up in that toxic family with Victoria Holt as a grandmother? She deleted his number and blocked it for good measure. Then she picked up her suitcases and walked out of the apartment, out of the building, out of the life she'd thought was hers. The women's shelter in Roxbury was a far cry from the luxury apartment in the South End. Caitlyn sat on the narrow cot in the room she shared with 3 other women, listening to the sounds of the city through the barred windows. The woman in the next bed, Maria, had been beaten by her husband. The one across from her, Destiny, had aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. The third, Agnes, was 73 and had lost her home to medical debt. "What's your story, honey?" Agnes asked on Caitlyn's first night, noticing her crying silently into her thin pillow. "I fell in love with the wrong man," Caitlyn whispered. Agnes reached across the gap between their beds and squeezed her hand. "Haven't we all, child? Haven't we all?" The days at the shelter blended together. Breakfast at 6 a.m., usually watery oatmeal and bruised fruit. Then out by 8 a.m. to pound the pavement looking for work, any work. The pregnancy made everything harder. The fatigue, the nausea, the growing bump she tried to hide under baggy clothes, because who would hire a pregnant woman with no references? She applied for jobs at fast food restaurants, grocery stores, cleaning services, anywhere that might not check too deeply into her background. But even those doors were closed. It seemed Victoria Holt's influence extended even to the margins of society. One particularly brutal day, after being turned away from yet another minimum-wage job, Caitlyn found herself at the harbor staring at the cruise ships docked there. Families streamed on and off, laughing, taking pictures, making memories. She watched them with a mixture of longing and something else, interest. "Beautiful, aren't they?" a voice said beside her. She turned to find an older man in a Sunshine Cruises uniform, his weathered face kind under a captain's cap. "They're magnificent," she agreed. "First time seeing them up close?" he asked. "No, I used to work in hospitality, hotels mainly, but I've always been fascinated by cruise ships. They're like floating cities, entirely self-contained worlds." The man's eyes lit up with interest. "Hospitality, you say? We're actually hiring for our New England coastal cruises. Nothing fancy, 3-day trips up to Maine and back. But it's honest work." Caitlyn's heart leaped, then sank. "I don't have references. My last employer and I parted on bad terms." The man studied her for a moment, taking in her worn clothes, her tired eyes, the proud set of her shoulders despite everything. "I'm James Santos, fleet manager for Sunshine's Northeast Division," he said, extending his hand. "And I've been in this business long enough to know when someone needs a second chance." "Can you work hard?" "Harder than anyone," Caitlyn said fervently. "Can you deal with difficult passengers, long hours, cramped quarters?" "Yes, yes, and yes," James smiled. "Then be at the Sunshine offices tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp. Ask for me. We'll start you in housekeeping. It's not glamorous, but it's a foot in the door. Work hard, and there might be opportunities to move up." "I'm pregnant," Caitlyn blurted out, then immediately wished she could take it back. But she couldn't start this with a lie, not when someone was finally offering her a chance. James's expression softened. "How far along?" 2 months. "You got anyone family, the father?" "No, just me." He was quiet for a long moment, and Caitlyn braced herself for him to withdraw the offer. Instead, he said, "My daughter was in your shoes once. Someone gave her a chance when she needed it most. Now she runs one of our ships in the Caribbean. Be there tomorrow, Miss Ramsey. Caitlyn Ramsey. Be there tomorrow, Miss Ramsey. We'll figure it out." That night in the shelter, Caitlyn lay awake despite her exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than despair. Not quite hope, she wasn't ready for that yet, but possibility. She thought about Damien, probably comfortable in his family's Beacon Hill mansion, never having to worry about his next meal or where he'd sleep. She thought about Victoria, so certain she'd won, so sure she'd put Caitlyn in her place. Her hand moved to her growing bump. "It's going to be okay," she whispered to the life inside her. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to be extraordinary." The next morning, she arrived at the Sunshine Cruises office at 6:30 a.m., 30 minutes early. James found her sitting on the steps, resume in hand, a resume that was mostly fiction, now her real experience erased by the Holt family's influence. "Eager. I like that," he said, unlocking the door. "Come on, let's get you started." The first weeks on the cruise ships were brutal. Caitlyn had thought she knew what hard work was, but cleaning staterooms on a moving vessel, while battling morning sickness, was a new level of exhaustion. She scrubbed toilets while the ship rocked, changed linens at record speed during port turnarounds, dealt with passengers who treated her like she was invisible. But she never complained, never missed a shift, never gave anyone a reason to regret taking a chance on her. She studied the ship's operations in her off hours, learned about navigation and safety protocols, guest services, and entertainment programming. She made friends with the crew, people from all over the world, who'd come to work on the seas for their own reasons, their own second chances. "You're different from the others," her supervisor Raj told her one day as they prepped rooms for a new batch of passengers. "You work like you're trying to prove something." "Maybe I am," Caitlyn replied, thinking of Victoria's cold smile, of Damien's cowardice, of everyone who'd written her off. As her pregnancy progressed, the crew rallied around her. The ship's doctor, Patricia, monitored her carefully. The kitchen staff made sure she got extra portions. Her bunkmate, Elena from the Philippines, knitted tiny baby clothes in their off hours. It wasn't the family she'd planned, but it was family nonetheless. 5 months into her pregnancy, during a particularly rough storm off Cape Cod, Caitlyn was cleaning the main deck lounge when she heard a commotion. A passenger, an elderly woman, had fallen on the rain-slicked deck and was lying unconscious. The crew member who should have been monitoring that area was nowhere to be found. Without thinking, Caitlyn rushed over, her training from a long-ago CPR course kicking in. She stabilized the woman's neck, checked her breathing, and started chest compressions while shouting for help. By the time the medical team arrived, the woman was conscious and breathing normally. "You saved her life," Dr. Patricia said later. "Another few minutes without oxygen, and she might have had permanent brain damage." The woman turned out to be Margaret Winters, a wealthy widow from Connecticut, who'd been taking the cruise to scatter her late husband's ashes at sea. She insisted on thanking Caitlyn personally. "My dear girl," she said, clutching Caitlyn's hand in her frail ones. "You're pregnant and you still ran to help me. What are you doing cleaning rooms? You should be running this ship." "Just doing my job, Mrs. Winters," Caitlyn replied. "No, you did much more than that." Margaret studied her shrewdly. "I've been taking these cruises for 20 years. I know when someone doesn't belong in housekeeping. What's your story?" Maybe it was the kindness in the older woman's eyes, or the exhaustion, or the pregnancy hormones, but Caitlyn found herself telling Margaret everything. The engagement, the abandonment, the systematic destruction of her life, the baby Damien didn't know about. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression growing stonier with each detail. "The Holts," she said finally. "Of course. Victoria Holt is a viper in Valentino. I've known her for 40 years, watched her destroy anyone she perceived as a threat to her perfect little kingdom. Her son is weak, just like his father was. You're better off without them." "That's what I keep telling myself," Caitlyn said. "But you don't believe it yet," Margaret observed. "You will. When you're holding your baby, when you've built something of your own, you'll understand that this was a gift, not a curse. Victoria Holt did you a favor, my dear. She showed you who they really are before you were legally tied to them." Before the cruise ended, Margaret pressed a business card into Caitlyn's hand. "My nephew runs a venture capital firm. They're always looking for people with fresh ideas in the hospitality sector. When you're ready, and you will be ready someday, call him. Tell him Aunt Maggie sent you." Caitlyn tucked the card away, not believing she'd ever use it, but touched by the gesture. 3 weeks later, she went into labor during a turnaround day in Boston Harbor. It was too early, she was only at 34 weeks. James himself drove her to Mass General, the same hospital where she would have delivered if she'd married Damien, if she'd become a Holt. The labor was long and complicated. 23 hours of pain that made her want to give up, to surrender to the exhaustion. But then she thought of Victoria's smug face, of Damien's cowardly letter, and she found reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. "Push Caitlyn." Dr. Patricia, who'd come from the ship to be with her, urged, "You're almost there." And then, with a final scream that felt like it came from her soul, her son was born. They placed him on her chest, this tiny, perfect creature, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they finally opened, were the same green as his father's. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He needs a name," the nurse prompted gently. Caitlyn looked at her son, this unexpected blessing, who'd given her a reason to keep fighting when everything else was lost. "Kai," she said. Kai Marcus Ramsey. That's a beautiful name, Dr. Patricia said. What does it mean? It means ocean in Hawaiian, Caitlyn explained. Because the sea gave us both a second chance. But the universe wasn't done testing her. 20 minutes later, just as they were about to move her to recovery, the contractions started again. There's another one, the doctor announced, checking the ultrasound with disbelief. Twins. How did we miss this? The second baby came faster, as if eager to join her brother in the world. A girl smaller than Kai, but with the same fierce spirit screaming her arrival for all to hear. Zara, Caitlyn said without hesitation. Zara Rose Ramsey. It means dawn. She lay there with a baby in each arm, exhausted beyond measure, but filled with a love so powerful it felt like it might consume her. These weren't the children she'd planned, born into wealth and privilege with a father who'd cherished them. These were her children, hers alone, and she would move heaven and earth to give them the life they deserved. The crew visited in shifts, bringing gifts and well wishes. James stood by her bedside like a proud grandfather holding Kai, while Elena cooed over Zara. You know you can't come back to the ships for a while, James said gently. Not with two newborns. I know, Caitlyn replied, though the thought of losing her job, her newfound family, terrified her. But, James continued, Sunshine Cruises has a corporate office here in Boston. They need someone to help coordinate the shore excursions, work with local vendors, that sort of thing. It's desk work, regular hours, and they have a daycare on site. I may have put in a word. Caitlyn looked up at him with tears in her eyes. James, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, he said gruffly. You've earned it. Every opportunity, every break, you've earned it through hard work and determination. Don't let anyone tell you different. 6 weeks later, Caitlyn walked into the Sunshine Cruises corporate office pushing a double stroller, her head held high despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. The other employees looked at her curiously, the young single mother who'd somehow landed a coordinator position without the usual credentials. She proved herself quickly revolutionizing the shore excursion program, with innovative partnerships and unique experiences that increased customer satisfaction scores by 30% in her first quarter. She worked while the twins napped in their bouncy chairs beside her desk, typed reports while breastfeeding, took conference calls while walking them around the office to stop their crying. I don't know how you do it, her colleague Jennifer said one day, watching Caitlyn juggle a phone call, a spreadsheet, and a bottle for Zara simultaneously. When you don't have a choice, you find a way, Caitlyn replied. But she had bigger dreams than coordination. Every night after the twins were asleep, she studied. Online courses in business management, maritime law, customer experience design. She used the company's tuition reimbursement program to slowly work toward her MBA, one class at a time. The twins grew, and with them, Caitlyn's ambitions. Kai was thoughtful and observant, always watching with those green eyes that reminded her painfully of Damien. Zara was fierce and determined, never backing down from a challenge, even as a toddler. They were her motivation, her reason, her everything. 1 year became 2, then 3. Caitlyn moved up from coordinator to manager, from manager to director. She moved out of the shelter into a small apartment in Dorchester, nothing fancy but theirs. She enrolled the twins in a good preschool, bought them new clothes instead of second-hand, even managed to save a little each month. Sometimes late at night, she'd check social media to see what became of Damien. He'd married someone appropriate, Melissa Worthington, daughter of a senator, in a lavish ceremony at the Ritz-Carlton. They looked perfect in their photos, plastic and polished. She wondered if he ever thought of her, if he ever wondered what might have been. Then Kai would cry out in his sleep, or Zara would crawl into her bed, seeking comfort, and she'd remember that she'd gotten the better end of the deal. On the twins' 4th birthday, as they celebrated with a small party at a local park, Caitlyn watched them play with the other children and felt a fierce pride. They didn't have trust funds or family connections, but they had something better. They had her love, her determination, and her absolute faith in their potential. "Mommy, look!" Zara called, showing off on the monkey bars. "I can do it all by myself." "That's my brave girl," Caitlyn called back. "Mom, why don't we have a daddy?" Kai asked suddenly, as he sometimes did, his serious little face looking up at her. Caitlyn knelt down to his level. "Because our family is perfect just the way it is. We have each other, and that's all we need. But Tommy has a daddy, and Emma has 2 daddies. Every family is different," she explained gently. "Ours is small but mighty, like a team of superheroes." "Are you a superhero, Mommy?" Zara asked, joining them. "No, baby, but you two make me feel like one." That night, after the twins were asleep, chocolate cake still smeared on their faces, despite her best efforts to clean them, Caitlyn pulled out Margaret Winters's business card. It was worn from years of being moved from wallet to wallet, but the information was still legible. She thought about everything she'd learned, everything she'd built, the ideas she had for transforming the cruise industry, making it more accessible, more innovative, more experiential. She thought about the Holts probably at some charity gala right now, never imagining that the girl they'd discarded was slowly, methodically building something of her own. She picked up her phone and composed an email to Margaret's nephew. It was time to stop surviving and start thriving. Time to show everyone, especially herself, what Caitlyn Ramsey was truly capable of. As she hit send, she heard Damien's voice in her memory. "You're different. You're real." "Yes," she said to the empty room, to the ghosts of her past, to the promise of her future. "I am." The response from Margaret's nephew, Christopher Winters, came 3 days later. Caitlyn read it while the twins ate breakfast, Kai carefully arranging his Cheerios in patterns, while Zara tried to feed hers to their neighbor's cat through the window. "Ms. Ramsey," the email began. "My aunt has spoken highly of you. I'd be interested in hearing your ideas. Can you meet next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Winters Capitol, 50th floor, Prudential Tower?" "Mommy's smiling weird," Zara announced, causing Kai to look up from his cereal art. "Mommy might have a meeting with someone important," Caitlyn said, her heart racing. "More important than us?" Kai asked with 4-year-old logic. "Nobody's more important than you two," she assured them, but her mind was already racing through possibilities. Tuesday arrived, gray and drizzly, typical November weather in Boston. Caitlyn dropped the twins at preschool, then changed in the bathroom at work into her one good suit, a navy blue ensemble she'd found at a consignment shop and had tailored to fit perfectly. She told her supervisor she had a doctor's appointment and took the T to Back Bay, her presentation materials clutched in a folder that had seen better days. The Prudential Tower loomed above her, all glass and steel and intimidation. The last time she'd been in a building like this, she'd been serving canapes to people who looked through her like she was invisible. Now she was walking through the lobby with purpose, even if her hands shook slightly as she signed in at security. Christopher Winters looked nothing like his aunt. Where Margaret was soft and grandmotherly, he was sharp angles and intense focus. His office commanded a view of the entire city, and Caitlyn couldn't help but search for the Holt Industries building in the skyline. "Don't be nervous," Christopher said, apparently reading her expression. "I don't bite despite what my reputation might suggest. Aunt Maggie says you have ideas about revolutionizing cruise experiences. I'm listening." Caitlyn took a breath and began. She talked about the untapped market of young families of creating themed cruises that were educational and entertaining. She proposed partnerships with universities for floating classrooms, with tech companies for innovation summits at sea. She painted a picture of cruises as transformative experiences rather than passive vacations. "The industry is stuck in the past," she said, warming to her subject. "Still catering to retirees and honeymooners. But there's an entire generation that wants meaningful travel, wants their children to experience the world differently. I've spent 3 years watching families on these ships studying what works and what doesn't. I know exactly what's missing." Christopher leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "And you think you can build this A-girl from Forgive Me Nowhere with 2 kids and no capital?" The words stung, but Caitlyn had been hardened by worse. Margaret Vanderbilt was a secretary when she started what became the Four Seasons. Howard Schultz grew up in housing projects before building Starbucks. Background doesn't determine potential, Mr. Winters. Vision and determination do. "Aunt Maggie said you had spirit," Christopher mused. "Tell me about your twins." The change of subject threw her, but Caitlyn answered honestly. "Kai and Zara. They're 4. They're brilliant and challenging, and the reason I get up every morning ready to fight for more." "Their father, not in the picture," Caitlyn said firmly. "Never has been, never will be." Christopher studied her for a long moment. "I looked into you, you know. After Aunt Maggie called. There are gaps in your history. The kind of gaps that usually mean someone powerful wanted something erased." Caitlyn's stomach clenched, but she kept her expression neutral. "Everyone has a past, Mr. Winters. Mine taught me that the only person I can rely on is myself. That's made me stronger, not weaker." "Indeed." He stood walking to the window. "I don't typically invest in hospitality. Too volatile, too dependent on economic fluctuations. But Aunt Maggie has never steered me wrong, and your ideas—" He turned back to her. "Your ideas have merit. I'm willing to offer you seed funding. 50,000 to start with the potential for more if you meet certain milestones." Caitlyn felt the room spin slightly. $50,000. More money than she'd ever seen at once. Thank you. You won't regret this." "I better not," Christopher said with a slight smile. "But there are conditions. You'll need to continue working while building this. I'm not funding your living expenses, just the business development. You'll need to incorporate the create a business plan that will satisfy my partners and show measurable progress within 6 months. Can you handle that?" "I can handle anything," Caitlyn said with conviction. "One more thing," Christopher added as she prepared to leave. "The Holtz, that's who buried you, isn't it?" Caitlyn froze. "How did you—" "Please. I've been in this city longer than you've been alive. I know Victoria Holt's handiwork when I see it. Damien was supposed to be your Prince Charming, wasn't he?" "That was a long time ago," Caitlyn said quietly. "Not so long that the scars have healed," Christopher observed. "Good. Scars can be useful. They remind us what we've survived. But don't let revenge be your only motivation, Ms. Ramsey. Build something because you love it, not because you hate them." That night, Caitlyn sat on her fire escape while the twins slept, looking out over the city lights. She pulled out her phone, and for the first time in years, typed Damien's name into Google. The results flooded in society pages, business journals, charity galas. His wedding to Melissa had been the social event of the season. They had a son now, Damien Jr., heir to an empire. She studied a recent photo from some fundraiser. Damien looked older, softer around the edges, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Melissa was perfectly polished, professionally, beautiful, one possessive hand on his arm. They looked like what they were, a business arrangement masquerading as a marriage. "You got everything you chose," she whispered to the photo. "I hope it was worth it." She deleted the search history, and went inside to check on the twins. Kai had kicked off his dinosaur blanket, and she tucked it back around him. Zara was sprawled starfish style across her toddler bed, taking up every inch of space as was her way. These were her treasures, her reasons, her future. The next months were a blur of 18-hour days. She worked her regular job at Sunshine Cruises, gaining access to industry data and contacts. Nights were for the twins' homework once they started kindergarten, bedtime stories, wiping tears, and kissing scraped knees. After they slept, she became a student again, teaching herself everything from maritime law to digital marketing. Her dining table became command central for Ramsey Exclusive Experiences, her company that existed more in potential than reality. She created business plans, financial projections, partnership proposals. She reached out to every contact she'd made in 3 years, selling them on her vision of what cruising could become. "Mommy's always working," Zara complained one Saturday, as Caitlyn typed frantically on her laptop while the twins played in the small playground behind their building. "I'm building something for us, baby," Caitlyn explained, pulling her daughter onto her lap. "Something that will give you and Kai choices I never had." "Like what?" Kai asked, always the more serious twin. "Like which college you want to attend, which dreams you want to chase, which adventures you want to have." "I want to be a pirate," Zara declared. "I want to be an astronaut," Kai added. "Then I'm building you a launching pad," Caitlyn said, kissing both their heads. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Jennifer from work mentioned that her sister ran educational programs for gifted children and was always looking for unique learning experiences. Within a week, Caitlyn had pitched her on a pilot program, a 3-day floating classroom cruise focusing on marine biology, with actual scientists leading workshops, hands-on experiments, and exclusive access to research facilities at Woods Hole. "This is brilliant," Jennifer's sister Amanda said, after reviewing the proposal. "Parents are always looking for enrichment opportunities that aren't just glorified daycare. If you can deliver this, I have 200 families who'd sign up tomorrow." Caitlyn negotiated with Sunshine Cruises to charter one of their smaller vessels during the off-season. She used Christopher's seed money to hire marine biologists from MIT, created custom educational materials, and designed an experience that would make learning feel like adventure. The night before the first cruise, she couldn't sleep. Everything she'd worked for came down to these 3 days. If it failed, she'd have burned through most of her funding with nothing to show for it. If it succeeded. "You've got this, Mommy," Kai said sleepily from his doorway, his little voice full of confidence. "What are you doing up, sweetheart?" "You were walking around loud," he said matter-of-factly. "But it's okay. You're going to do great. You always do." The cruise exceeded every expectation. The children were engaged, the parents thrilled, and the scientists impressed by the level of organization and innovation. By the time they docked back in Boston, Amanda had already committed to booking 3 more cruises, and word was spreading through parenting networks and educational forums. "This is just the beginning," James told her, having come to observe the operation. "You've found a niche nobody else even knew existed." Within 6 months, Ramsey Exclusive Experiences had organized 12 educational cruises, each one sold out. Christopher increased his investment, bringing in 2 other partners. Caitlyn hired her first employees, an operations manager and an education coordinator. She moved the twins to a better school, bought a used car that actually started on cold mornings, and even managed to put money in savings. But success brought new challenges. The more visible she became, the more she worried about the Holts noticing. Boston was a small city when you moved in certain circles, and she was starting to move in those circles. The collision came at a supplier conference at the Boston Convention Center. Caitlyn was negotiating with a catering company when she heard a familiar laugh. Her blood froze. Damien stood 20 feet away, talking to a group of investors, his perfect wife on his arm. For a moment, she considered running. Then she remembered she had every right to be there. She'd built her place in this industry through her own sweat and determination. She turned back to her negotiation, but her hands trembled slightly as she signed the contract. Caitlyn. His voice hadn't changed. Still smooth, still cultured, still capable of making her heart race even after all these years. She turned slowly, arranging her features into polite neutrality. Damien. She didn't say his last name, didn't acknowledge Melissa, who was studying her with sharp interest. I heard you were working in the cruise industry, he said, clearly thrown by the encounter. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm sure there are a lot of things you didn't expect, Caitlyn replied coolly. If you'll excuse me, I have another meeting. Wait, he said, catching her arm. The wedding ring on his finger caught the light, and she pulled away as if burned. Can we talk, please? We have nothing to talk about, she said. You made your choice. I made mine. Let's leave it at that. You look good, he said desperately. Successful. I'm glad you're doing well. No thanks to you, she said before she could stop herself. Melissa stepped forward, then her smile sharp as a blade. Darling, we should go. The Weatherbees are waiting. Of course, Damien said, but his eyes stayed on Caitlyn. It was good to see you. Caitlyn didn't respond, just walked away on legs that felt like jelly. She made it to the bathroom before the shaking really started, splashing cold water on her face while taking deep breaths. Pull yourself together, she told her reflection. He's nothing. He's nobody. You've built something without him in spite of him. When she got home that night, the twins were already asleep at the babysitter's apartment down the hall. Mrs. Chen, a retired teacher, who'd become their surrogate grandmother, took one look at Caitlyn's face and pulled her into a hug. Bad day. I saw their father. Caitlyn admitted the words spilling out. He doesn't know about them. He can never know about them. Then he won't, Mrs. Chen said firmly. You've protected them this long. You'll keep protecting them. But the encounter had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. That night, she dreams of a different life, one where Damien had been brave, where they'd raised the twins together, where love had been enough. She woke with tears on her face and Zara standing by her bed. Bad dream, Mommy? Her daughter asked, crawling in beside her. Something like that, baby. Want me to beat it up? Zara asked, raising her tiny fists. My little warrior. Caitlyn laughed, pulling her close. The bad dreams don't stand a chance. The next morning brought an unexpected email. Victoria Holt wanted to meet. The older woman had chosen the Taj Hotel for their confrontation, all old Boston elegance and implied superiority. She sat in the lobby bar like a queen holding court, her silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. Mrs. Holt, Caitlyn said, sitting down without invitation. Ms. Ramsey, you've been busy. I've been working. There's a difference. Victoria's smile was thin. Don't be clever with me, girl. You think I don't know what you're doing, building your little empire, making connections, showing up at industry events where you know Damien will be. Your son's presence at industry events has nothing to do with me, Caitlyn said evenly. I'm building a business. If that threatens you somehow. You don't threaten me, Victoria cut in. But you're a complication. Damien was unsettled after seeing you. Melissa noticed. That's a problem. Your son's marriage is not my concern. No, but your bastards are. The word hit like a slap. Caitlyn's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, Did you think I wouldn't investigate twins born 7 months after you and Damien separated? The math isn't complicated. My children are none of your business. They are if they're Holt's. They're not Holt's, Caitlyn said fiercely. They're Ramsey's. They're mine. They have nothing to do with your family. Victoria studied her for a long moment. Good. Keep it that way. Because if you ever try to claim, I want nothing from you, Caitlyn interrupted. Not your money, not your name, not your toxic legacy. My children are better off never knowing what their father chose over them. Then we understand each other. Victoria stood, then paused. You've done well for yourself. Better than I expected. But don't overreach, Ms. Ramsey. You're playing in deeper waters now. After she left, Caitlyn ordered a whiskey, her hands shaking. The bartender, noticing her distress, didn't charge her for it. Rough meeting? He asked sympathetically. Something like that. Well, whatever that lady said, don't let it get to you. I've seen her in here before. She's got a way of making everyone feel small. Not anymore, Caitlyn said, downing the whiskey in one burn. Never again. She threw herself into work with renewed determination. If the Holts thought she was playing in deep water, she'd show them she could swim. The educational cruises expanded to include high school science programs, college credit courses, even corporate team-building retreats. She partnered with museums, research institutions, and tech companies, creating experiences that blurred the line between vacation and transformation. The twins started first grade, and Caitlyn made sure to be there for every milestone, even if it meant working until 3 a.m. to make up for it. Kai showed an aptitude for mathematics that stunned his teachers, while Zara charmed everyone with her natural leadership skills and fierce protectiveness of her baby brother. She was older by 12 minutes and never let him forget it. Your mommy must be so proud, their teacher, Ms. Williams, said at parent-teacher conferences. She is, Zara answered before Caitlyn could. She tells us every day. And we're proud of her too. She's building an empire. An empire. Miss Williams laughed. That's what she calls it when she thinks we're asleep, Kai added seriously. She says she's building an empire for us. That night, tucking them in, Caitlyn asked, You two listen when I'm working. Sometimes, Zara admitted. You talk on the phone a lot. You say things like vertical integration and market penetration and scalable solutions. Do you know what any of that means? No, Kai said, but it sounds important. Like you're important. You two are what's important, Caitlyn said, but she was touched by their faith in her. By their second anniversary in business, Ramsey Exclusive Experiences had generated $2 million in revenue. Christopher and his partners were impressed enough to invest another $500,000, suggesting it was time to think bigger. You've proven the concept, Christopher said during a board meeting. Now it's time to scale. Have you thought about purchasing your own vessel? Every day, Caitlyn admitted, but ships are expensive, even used ones. Not if you're creative about financing. And I have a lead. There's a cruise line in Florida looking to offload some of their older vessels. Still serviceable, but they're upgrading their fleet. With the right renovations, one of those ships could be your flagship. The idea was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Owning a ship would change everything: the scale of investment, the level of risk, the potential for either triumph or catastrophic failure. Do it, Mom, Kai said that night over dinner, proving once again that he heard more than she realized. Yeah, buy the big boat, Zara added, bouncing in her seat. It's not that simple, loves. It's a huge risk. But you're brave, Kai said simply. You're always brave. Looking at her children, these two miracles who existed, Because she'd chosen to be brave when it would have been easier to give up, Caitlyn made her decision. "Okay," she said. "Let's buy a ship." The negotiation took months. Caitlyn flew to Florida 3 times, leaving the twins with Mrs. Chen to inspect vessels and haggle with corporate representatives, who clearly thought she was in over her head. She let them think that it made them careless, more willing to make concessions because they assumed she didn't know any better. The ship she finally chose was 20 years old, but had good bones, a 50,000-ton vessel that could hold 1 ton to 500 passengers. It needed work, significant work, but she could see its potential. With the right renovations, it could become something special, something uniquely hers. "You're really doing this, Mo," James said when she told him. He'd become her unofficial mentor, the closest thing to a father figure she'd ever had. "Buying your own ship. I'm proud of you, kiddo." "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Complacency is what kills businesses." The day she signed the papers, making her the owner of what would be rechristened the Discovery, Caitlyn stood on the bridge of her ship, and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization of how far she'd come. 5 years ago, she'd been abandoned at the altar, pregnant and penniless, with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a determination not to let them win. Now she owned a cruise ship. She employed 17 people. She was building something that would last, something that would give her children the future they deserved. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it, then noticed it was a Boston area code. Opening it, she found a single line. "Congratulations on the ship. You've earned it. D." She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it and blocked the number. Damien Holt had made his choice. She'd made hers. There was no going back, only forward. That night, she showed the twins pictures of their ship. They were beside themselves with excitement, already making plans for their cabins for the adventures they'd have. "Will we live on the boat?" Zara asked hopefully. "No, baby. We'll still live here. But we'll visit the ship a lot, and maybe sometimes we can sail with the passengers." "Like pirates?" Zara asked. "Like entrepreneurs," Caitlyn corrected. "What's an entrepreneur?" Kai asked. "Someone who builds something from nothing," Caitlyn explained. "Someone who takes risks to create something new." "Like you," Kai said. "Like us," Caitlyn corrected, pulling both twins into her arms. "We're a team. Remember, everything I build is for us." The renovation of the Discovery took 6 months, and every penny she could borrow, beg, or earn. She supervised every detail, from the educational labs being installed on Deck 3 to the observation lounges being expanded to create better viewing opportunities for wildlife. She insisted on cabin configurations that would work for families, on safety features that exceeded requirements, on technology that would make learning feel like play. The twins spent weekends with her at the shipyard in Rhode Island, wearing tiny hard hats and following her around as she directed contractors and argued with suppliers. They became mascots for the crew, with Zara charming everyone, and Kai asking surprisingly astute questions about engineering and navigation. "Your kids are something special," the chief engineer told her one day, watching Kai study the engine schematics with intense concentration. "They're everything," Caitlyn replied simply. 3 weeks before the Discovery's maiden voyage, disaster nearly struck. One of her primary investors pulled out, spooked by market volatility, leaving her short nearly $1 million with bills coming due. She spent 2 sleepless nights trying to figure out how to bridge the gap, knowing that failure now would mean losing everything. On the 3rd night, as she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets and desperation, her phone rang. Margaret Winters, now 83 and sharp as ever. "I hear you're in trouble," the older woman said without preamble. "Mrs. Winters, Don't lie to me, child. Christopher keeps me informed. You need money. I need a miracle, Caitlyn admitted. No, you need an investor who believes in you. I'll wire the money tomorrow. Mrs. Winters, I can't. Yes, you can. Do you know why? Because you're going to succeed. Because you have something none of these other cruise lines have: hunger. You're not playing it safe because you can't afford to. That's what will make you great. Caitlyn cried after hanging up, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers who'd become family by the weight of expectations and trust placed in her. Mommy. Kai appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. Are you sad? No, baby. Sometimes people cry when they're grateful. Grateful for what? For chances. For people who believe in us. For you and your sister. Oh, Kai said, then padded over to climb into her lap. I believe in you too, Mommy. So does Zara. So does Mrs. Chen and Mr. James and everybody. When did you get so wise? She asked, holding him tight. Tuesday, he said seriously, making her laugh despite everything. The maiden voyage of the Discovery was scheduled for the last week of March, a 5-day educational cruise focused on marine ecosystems with 3 renowned scientists on board, and every cabin sold out. The night before departure, Caitlyn stood on the deck of her ship looking out at Boston Harbor. She'd done it. Against all odds, against all obstacles, she'd built something from nothing. Tomorrow, 1,200 passengers would board this vessel, trusting her to deliver an experience that would educate and inspire their children. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but she was ready for it. Her phone buzzed with a message from her operations manager. Early boarding family just arrived. Says they have special approval. She hadn't authorized any early boarding. Frowning, she made her way to the gangplank, ready to deal with whatever mix-up had occurred. The family waiting there made her blood run cold. Victoria Holt stood with perfect posture despite her 70 years, her expression unreadable. Beside her was Melissa, holding the hand of a boy who could only be Damien Jr. He looked exactly like Kai, down to the way he tilted his head when curious. Mrs. Holt, Caitlyn said, proud that her voice didn't shake. I wasn't aware you'd booked passage. Last-minute decision, Victoria replied smoothly. My grandson has been studying marine biology. This seemed like an appropriate educational opportunity. It was a power play, pure and simple. Victoria was marking territory, reminding Caitlyn that the Holts could insert themselves into her world whenever they chose. Of course, Caitlyn said, with professional calm. Welcome aboard the Discovery. I hope you find the experience educational. As they walked past, Damien Jr. looked back at her with those familiar green eyes, and Caitlyn's heart clenched. This boy could have been her son's brother. Should have been. But that was another life, another story. She watched them disappear into the ship's interior, her hands clenched so tightly, her nails bit into her palms. The audacity of Victoria Holt knew no bounds, but Caitlyn wouldn't let her ruin this moment. Tomorrow would be the triumph she'd worked toward for years, and no ghost from her past would diminish it. That night she barely slept, running through every detail of the voyage one more time. The educational programs were flawless. The crew thoroughly trained the scientists, prepared with engaging presentations that would captivate both children and adults. She'd personally overseen every aspect, from the menu selections that accommodated various dietary restrictions to the safety protocols that exceeded industry standards. At dawn, she stood on the bridge in her crisp captain's whites. She'd earned her maritime certifications over the past 2 years, determined to be more than just an owner. Captain Reynolds, who she'd hired to actually sail the ship while she learned, stood beside her with paternal pride. You ready for this? He asked. I was born ready, Caitlyn replied, then laughed at her own bravado. Actually, I'm terrified. Good captain always is on maiden voyage. Means you care. The passengers began boarding at 8 a.m. families streaming up the gangplank, with excited children and curious parents. Caitlyn greeted many of them personally, remembering names from registration forms, making connections that would serve her business for years to come. Mrs. Patterson. How wonderful that Emma could join us. I remember you mentioning her interest in dolphins. She'll love tomorrow's cetacean presentation. Mr. and Mrs. Kumar, welcome aboard. Adya's essay about ocean conservation was remarkable for a 10-year-old. Has she considered the Young Scientists program we're launching this summer? Each interaction was genuine, her interest real. These weren't just passengers. They were validation of her vision, proof that she'd identified a need and filled it brilliantly. She managed to avoid Victoria and Melissa most of the morning, though she caught glimpses of them touring the ship with barely concealed surprise at its quality. Let them look. Let them see what she'd built without their name, their money, their connections. The Discovery departed Boston Harbor at noon, sliding past the skyline as hundreds of passengers lined the rails, waving at the shrinking shore. Caitlyn stood on the bridge wing, watching her city fade, thinking about another departure years ago, when she'd left everything behind with 2 suitcases and a shattered heart. Ms. Ramsey. Her education coordinator, Patricia, appeared with a tablet. Small problem. The Chen family's son is severely seasick already, and we're barely moving. Set them up in the medical bay, give them our best cabin on a lower deck where the motion is minimal, and comp their entire trip, Caitlyn said without hesitation. Then have Dr. Morrison check in personally every 2 hours. That's a significant loss. That's a family whose experience matters more than profit. They'll remember how we handled this crisis, not the crisis itself. Patricia smiled. This is why the crew loves working for you. As the afternoon progressed, Caitlyn moved through the ship like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. She observed the marine biology workshop where Dr. Sarah Chen had 40 kids entranced with her tide pool presentation. She checked in with the kitchen where her head chef was preparing allergen-free meals with the same care as the regular menu. She mediated a dispute between 2 families over deck chair placement with diplomatic grace that would have impressed the United Nations. At dinner, she couldn't avoid the Holt table any longer. They'd been seated by horrible coincidence or careful design near the captain's table, where she was hosting the lead scientists and major donors. The ship is more impressive than I expected, Victoria said when their paths inevitably crossed near the dessert station. You've done adequate work with an older vessel. Adequate, from Victoria Holt, was practically a Nobel Prize. Caitlyn inclined her head slightly. The Discovery serves its purpose. And what purpose is that? Melissa interjected her tone, suggesting she found the entire concept quaint. Entertaining children. Educating them, Caitlyn corrected. Inspiring them. Showing them that learning can be an adventure rather than an obligation. She looked directly at Damien Jr., who was listening intently. The ocean has so much to teach us if we're brave enough to explore it. The boy's eyes lit up. I want to be a marine biologist when I grow up, like Jacques Cousteau. Then you're on the right ship, Caitlyn told him warmly, her heart aching at how much he looked like Kai. Tomorrow morning, Dr. Chen is doing a special presentation on underwater photography. You should attend. Can I, grandmother? The boy asked eagerly. Victoria's expression suggested she'd rather eat glass, but she nodded stiffly. If you wish. That night, after the passengers had retired and the ship sailed smoothly through calm seas, Caitlyn stood alone on the top deck, breathing salt air and freedom. Her phone buzzed with photos from Mrs. Chen, the twins in their pajamas, holding a sign that said, "We love you, Mommy, smooth sailing." She was video calling them when James appeared, having come aboard as her special guest. "Hey there, tiny pirates," he called out, making both children squeal with delight. "Mr. James, is our ship beautiful?" Zara demanded. "The most beautiful ship on the ocean," he assured her. "Your mom's done something special here." After the twins signed off with blown kisses and promises to be good for Mrs. Chen, Shomes leaned against the rail beside her. "You know there are Holts on board," he said quietly. "I know." "You okay with that?" "I have to be. This is my world now. I can't ban every ghost from my past." "That boy looks just like Kai." "I noticed," Caitlyn said tightly. "Does Damien know?" "No, and he never will. That's my choice to make, and I made it long ago." James studied her profile in the moonlight. "You're stronger than anyone I know, kid. But strength doesn't mean you have to carry everything alone." "I'm not alone," she said. "I have you, the twins, Mrs. Chen, this entire crew who believed in my vision. I have more family now than I ever did when I was trying to marry into one." The next 3 days passed in a blur of successful programming and smooth operations. The scientists were engaging, the weather cooperated, and the passengers were effusive in their praise. Even the seasick Chen boy recovered and ended up being one of the most enthusiastic participants in the workshops. Caitlyn managed to maintain professional distance from the Holts, though she noticed Victoria watching her constantly, those sharp eyes missing nothing. Melissa seemed bored by the entire experience, spending most of her time in the adults-only lounge with her phone. But Damien Jr. threw himself into every activity with an enthusiasm that made Caitlyn's heart ache. On the 4th morning, disaster struck in an unexpected way. Caitlyn was reviewing submissions for the children's art contest when her operations manager rushed in, face pale. "We have a problem. Someone's leaked to the Boston Globe that Victoria Holt is on board, along with speculation about why she'd choose your cruise line over more established luxury brands." Caitlyn's stomach dropped as she read the article on his tablet. It was carefully worded, but the implication was clear: either Victoria Holt had lost her mind, or there was some connection between the families that hadn't been disclosed. The reporter had even dug up the fact that Damien had once been engaged to an unnamed hospitality worker before his marriage to Melissa. "How do you want to handle this?" her operations manager asked. "We don't," Caitlyn said firmly. "We continue operating as normal. Mrs. Holt is a passenger like any other. If pressed, we say we're honored that she chose the Discovery for her grandson's education. Nothing more." But the damage was spreading. Her phone started buzzing with calls from investors, partners, journalists. Christopher Winters texted, "Need help with spin control." She was crafting responses when a knock came at her cabin door. She opened it to find Victoria Holt herself. "May I come in?" Caitlyn stepped aside wordlessly. Victoria entered and surveyed the modest captain's quarters with their pictures of the twins carefully turned face down since the Holts had boarded. "I didn't leak the story," Victoria said without preamble. "Whatever you might think of me, I don't court media attention." "I know," Caitlyn replied. "Your style is more surgical than splash." Victoria's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "The story will die. These things always do, but it raises questions. Questions you already have answers to." "Perhaps. Those children in the photographs you're hiding, they're Damien's." It wasn't a question. Caitlyn didn't answer. "They're 6 years old, which means you were pregnant when he left you. Does he know?" "What would change if he did?" Caitlyn asked. "Would he suddenly become brave? Would you suddenly accept children born to someone so far beneath your station? You've risen considerably since then." "I've risen despite you, not because of your approval. My children don't need the Holt name or money or toxic legacy. They have me." Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying her. "You've changed. The girl who was going to marry my son would have crumbled under this pressure. That girl had to become someone else to survive what your family did to her. My grandson Damien Jr., he's quite taken with you. Keeps talking about the nice captain lady who knows so much about the ocean. He's a sweet boy. He deserves better than the world you're raising him in." Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. "Careful. Or what you'll destroy me. You already tried that. I survived. Thrived even. Your threats have no power here, Mrs. Holt. This is my ship, my domain. You're just a passenger." Victoria stood to leave, then paused at the door. "He's miserable, you know. Damien. The marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. Melissa has her affairs, he has his work, and neither of them parents that boy with any real affection." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm 70 years old and beginning to realize that perhaps I've valued the wrong things." She left before Caitlyn could respond. The final night of the cruise featured the student presentations where children shared what they'd learned through art essays and demonstrations. Damien Jr. had created an elaborate poster about bioluminescence that showed real understanding beyond his 8 years. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen told him, as parents and children circulated through the display gallery. "You have a real scientific mind." The boy beamed, looking around for approval, but Melissa was at the bar and Victoria was taking a business call. His face fell slightly until Caitlyn approached. "This is exceptional work," she told him. "You didn't just memorize facts, you understood the concepts. That's the mark of a true scientist." "Really?" His eyes, so like Kai's, shone with pleasure. "Really? Would you like to help release the plankton samples we collected? We're doing it on the back deck in 10 minutes. He nodded eagerly, and she saw Victoria watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. That night, as the Discovery sailed back toward Boston, Caitlyn stood on the bridge for the last time this voyage. It had been a success by every measure, financial, educational, operational. But the Holt's presence had reminded her that the past was never as distant as she'd like it to be. Her phone rang. Christopher Winters. "I've been fielding calls all day about the Holt connection," he said. "You want to tell me what I'm dealing with? Ancient history that has no bearing on current operations. Try again. I'm your primary investor. I need to know if there's something that could affect the company." Caitlyn sighed. "Damien Holt and I were engaged 7 years ago. He broke it off. His mother has apparently decided to inspect what I've built. That's all." That's all. Caitlyn. The Holts could make things very difficult if they chose to. They have connections we can only dream of. They could have made things difficult. Past tense. I survived their worst 7 years ago. I can handle whatever they throw at me now. I hope you're right, because we're about to make you an offer that will change everything, and I need to know you can handle the pressure. What kind of offer? The kind we discuss in person. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. my office. And Caitlyn, wear your best suit. You're about to enter the major leagues. The Discovery docked at dawn, passengers disembarking with promises to book again, to tell friends, to write glowing reviews. Caitlyn stood at the gangplank, personally thanking each family, but her mind was on Christopher's cryptic message. The Holts were among the last to leave. Melissa hurried off without acknowledgement, but Victoria paused. "It was educational," she said carefully. "That was the intent." Victoria studied her for a moment. "You've built something impressive, Ms. Ramsey. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Before Caitlyn could respond, Damien Jr. broke free from his grandmother's hand and hugged Caitlyn around the waist. "Thank you for the best trip ever. he said, then ran after his mother. Victoria's expression softened slightly. He doesn't get much genuine attention. You gave him that. Thank you. She walked away, leaving Caitlyn stunned on the gangplank. A thank you from Victoria Holt. The world truly was full of surprises. By noon, she was home engulfed in tiny arms as the twins told her simultaneously about everything she'd missed. Kai had won the school spelling bee. Zara had gotten in trouble for correcting her teacher's math. They'd made her a welcome home card covered in glitter that would take weeks to fully clean up. Did the ship sail good? Kai asked. The ship sailed perfectly, she assured him. Did you meet any interesting people? Zara wanted to know. A few, Caitlyn said carefully, including a little boy who loves marine biology just like you love math, Kai. Can we meet him? Kai asked. I don't think so, sweetheart. He lives in a different world. But we all live in Boston, Zara pointed out with 6-year-old logic. Sometimes people can live in the same city, but different worlds. Caitlyn explained, though she knew they didn't really understand. At 2 o'clock, she sat in Christopher Winter's office, the city spread below them like a promise. He wasn't alone. 3 other people sat around the conference table, including a woman she recognized from Forbes magazine's last issue on innovative entrepreneurs. Caitlyn, meet the full board of Winter's Capital, Christopher said. We've been discussing your company's trajectory. The maiden voyage was impressive, the Forbes woman Linda Chen said. 98% satisfaction rate, full booking for your next 12 cruises, and word-of-mouth marketing that money can't buy. Thank you. We worked hard to deliver on our promises. We want to help you deliver on bigger promises, Christopher said. We're prepared to invest $15 million for a 40% stake in Ramsey exclusive experiences. Caitlyn's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. $15 million. With it, you could buy 2 more ships, expand to the Caribbean routes, hire the staff to run multiple simultaneous voyages. You could scale this concept nationally, potentially globally. 40% is a lot of equity, she managed to say, her mind racing. It is, but you'd maintain controlling interest, and you'd have the resources to become a major player rather than a niche operator. Think about it, Ramsey Cruises could become the go-to name for educational family voyages worldwide. Linda leaned forward. We've run the projections. With proper capitalization and marketing, you could be generating $100 million in revenue within 5 years. This could become a billion-dollar company, Caitlyn. $1 billion. From a girl who'd been homeless and pregnant 7 years ago to potentially running a billion-dollar company. The journey seemed impossible, yet here she was. I need time to think, she said. Of course, but not too much time. Word is already out about what you've built. Other cruise lines are starting to copy your model. First mover advantage only lasts so long. That night she sat with the twins as they did homework, her own work spread across the kitchen table. The investment offer documents competed for space with Kai's math worksheets and Zara's crayon drawings of ships. Mommy, what's equity? Kai asked, apparently reading over her shoulder. It's like sharing ownership of something. Like if you and Zara built a lemonade stand together, you'd each have equity in it. But you built your company yourself, Zara protested. Why should you share? Because sometimes to make something bigger, you need help, and helpers want something in return. Is it worth it? Kai asked with that startling maturity he sometimes displayed. I don't know yet, baby. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Her phone rang. James. Heard through the maritime grapevine about the Winter's offer, he said without preamble. You going to take it? Should I? Can't tell you that, kid. But I can tell you this, you've already done the impossible. Built something from nothing. Whatever you decide, you've already won. After the twins were asleep, she stood on her small balcony looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there in a Beacon Hill mansion, Damien was probably having dinner with his perfect wife and ignored son. Did he ever think about what might have been, Ned? He know she'd been pregnant when he abandoned her? It didn't matter. What mattered was the future she was building, brick by brick, sail by sail. The investment would change everything. The scale, the pressure, the possibility for either triumph or failure. But hadn't she always chosen the harder path? Hadn't she always bet on herself when no one else would? She went inside and opened her laptop, typing an email to Christopher. "I'm interested. Let's discuss terms." The next 6 months moved at warp speed. The investment came through and suddenly, Caitlyn had resources she'd only dreamed of. She purchased 2 more ships, the Explorer and the Adventurer, and hired captains and crews for all 3 vessels. She opened an office in Miami to coordinate Caribbean routes and another in Seattle for Alaska cruises. She hired 50 employees from marine biologists to marketing managers, building a team that shared her vision of transformative educational travel. The twins adapted to her success with remarkable resilience. They attended a better school, now had tutors and activities, but Caitlyn was careful not to spoil them. They still did chores, still understood the value of money, still remembered the tiny apartment where their journey had begun. "Why don't we have a big house like Emma's?" Zara asked one day after a playdate at a classmate's mansion. "Because we don't need a big house," Caitlyn explained. "We need a safe home, good food, excellent education, and each other. Everything else is just extra." "But extra can be nice," Zara pointed out. "It can, but it can also make you forget what really matters." The business grew exponentially. The Caribbean routes were booked solid within days of announcing them. Corporate retreats became a lucrative addition, with tech companies paying premium prices for innovation workshops at sea. Universities partnered with them for semester-at-sea programs that combined traditional coursework with hands-on maritime experience. But success brought scrutiny. The Boston Globe ran a profile on her titled, "From Nowhere to Everywhere, The Mysterious Rise of Caitlyn Ramsey." They dug deep, finding records of her time in the shelter, her sudden appearance in the cruise industry, the gaps in her history that suggested someone had tried to erase her. "No comment" became her standard response to personal questions, but the speculation continued. Who was Caitlyn Ramsey? Where had she come from? Who were the twins' father? The answers came closer to the surface at the Massachusetts Maritime Gala, the industry's premier annual event. Caitlyn attended as a sponsor, her company logo prominent among the established cruise lines. She wore a midnight blue gown that had cost more than she'd made in a year at her old hotel job, her mother's pearl hairpins, her only jewelry. She was discussing potential partnerships with a European cruise executive when she felt eyes on her. Across the ballroom, Damien stood, frozen champagne glass halfway to his lips, staring at her as if seeing a ghost. He looked older, she thought clinically. Still handsome, but worn somehow, like a painting that had been exposed to too much sun. Melissa stood beside him, glittering in diamonds, her hand possessively on his arm, as she chattered with another couple, oblivious to her husband's distraction. Caitlyn turned back to her conversation, but she could feel Damien's approach like a storm system moving in. "Caitlyn." His voice at her shoulder made her spine straighten. She turned slowly, her expression neutral. "Mr. Holt." The formal address made him flinch. "Could we talk privately? I don't believe we have anything to discuss." "Please." The desperation in his voice made her European colleague excuse himself diplomatically. 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, she followed him to a whiny corner, aware that eyes throughout the ballroom tracked their movement. "You look—" He started, then stopped. "God, Caitlyn, you look magnificent." And what you've built, it's incredible. Thank you. I've been following your success. The articles, the expansion. I'm so proud. You have no right to be proud. She cut him off. You forfeited that right 7 years ago. I know. God, I know. Not a day goes by that I don't regret. Your regret is not my concern. He stared at her, this composed, powerful woman, who bore little resemblance to the eager girl he'd abandoned. You hate me. No, she said simply. Hate would mean you still matter. You're just irrelevant. The word hit him like a physical blow. My mother said she sailed on your ship, said you were remarkable with Damien Jr. He's a bright child. He deserves better than what you're giving him. I know, Damien said quietly. I know I'm failing him. I'm failing at everything. The marriage is a sham, the business feels like a prison, and every day I wake up wondering how I became this person. You became this person the day you chose money over love, safety over courage, your mother over me. There's something else, he said urgently. Something I need to know. The twins are none of your business, she cut him off sharply. They're mine, aren't they? The timing? They're mine, she said firmly. Only mine. They have no father, no connection to the Holt family, no claim on your fortune or your name. They're Ramses, and that's all they need to be. Caitlyn, please. Damien reached for her arm, but she stepped back, her eyes flashing with a warning that made him drop his hand. You don't get to please me anymore, she said, her voice low enough that the nearby guests couldn't hear, but sharp enough to cut. You made your choice. Live with it. She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her cold. I dream about them sometimes, the children we might have had. What they would look like, sound like. Whether they'd have your determination or my... He stopped laughing bitterly. Well, clearly not my courage, since I don't have any. Caitlyn turned back slowly, and for just a moment her mask slipped. He saw the pain she'd buried, the struggle she'd endured, the strength it had taken to build her empire while raising 2 children alone. Then the mask was back harder than before. Your dreams are your own burden to bear, she said, just as my reality has been mine. She walked away, then her gown sweeping behind her, like a queen's robes, leaving him standing alone in the corner. Several people tried to approach him, but the look on his face kept them at bay. Melissa found him there 20 minutes later, 3 drinks deeper into the evening. What's wrong with you? She hissed, smiling for the crowd while her words dripped acid. You're embarrassing me. When am I not? He replied, setting down his empty glass. Don't start. Not here. She glanced across the room where Caitlyn was charming a group of investors. Is this about her? Your little charity case from years ago? Don't call her that. Oh, please. Your mother told me all about her. The poor little chambermaid who thought she could play princess, though I'll admit she's done well for someone from nothing. She's done more than well, Damien said quietly. She's done what I never could, built something real, something that matters. Melissa's laugh was cruel. You're pathetic, mooning over ancient history while your actual family stands right here. We're not a family. He said the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. We're a business arrangement. You have your affairs, I have my regrets, and our son has no one. The slap echoed across the ballroom, cutting through conversations like a knife. Every head turned to see Melissa standing with her hand raised, her face flushed with rage while Damien touched his reddening cheek with something almost like relief. How dare you, she seethed. The truth tends to have that effect, he replied, then walked out of the ballroom, leaving his wife, his mother, who had just arrived, and 200 of Boston's elite watching in shock. Caitlyn observed from across the room, feeling nothing but a distant pity. This was who he'd always been, weak when it mattered, dramatic when it didn't. She turned back to her conversation, but Christopher Winters appeared at her elbow. "That was quite a scene," he murmured. "Nothing to do with me." "Everything to do with you, I think. The way he looked at you, that's a man drowning in regret. Then he should have learned to swim 7 years ago." Christopher studied her. "You're harder than when we first met." "Stronger," she corrected. "There's a difference." The next morning brought a media frenzy. Photos of Melissa slapping Damien were on every society blog, accompanied by speculation about the cause. Several noted Caitlyn's presence at the gala, and the more enterprising reporters began connecting dots that had been carefully hidden for years. Caitlyn ignored it all, focusing instead on the twins' school play that evening. Kai was playing a scientist typecast already at 7 years old, while Zara had somehow convinced the drama teacher to let her be a pirate instead of a princess. "Why do you always have to be different?" Kai asked his sister, as Caitlyn helped them with their costumes. "Because different is more interesting," Zara replied, adjusting her eye patch with satisfaction. "Different can also be harder," Caitlyn warned gently. "You're different, Mommy," Zara pointed out. "And you're the strongest person in the whole world." "I'm not—" "Yes, you are," Kai interrupted with quiet certainty. "Mrs. Chen told us. She said you built a whole company by yourself when everyone said you couldn't. That makes you like a superhero." Caitlyn pulled them both close, breathing in their little kid smell of crayons and playground dirt and endless possibility. "You two are my superpowers," she whispered. The play was charming in the way all elementary school productions are forgotten lines. Props falling apart, one child who waved at their parents through the entire performance. Caitlyn sat in the third row, recording everything on her phone, surrounded by other parents doing the same. She didn't notice Victoria Holt slip in and take a seat in the back row. It wasn't until after the performance, as the twins were taking their bows and the audience was applauding, that Caitlyn saw her. Their eyes met across the auditorium, and Victoria inclined her head slightly, whether in acknowledgement or approval, Caitlyn couldn't tell. Outside, as families gathered for photos and congratulations, Victoria approached. The twins were with their teacher, practicing their pirate sword fight for any parent who would watch. "Mrs. Holt," Caitlyn said warily. "This is unexpected." "I came to see them," Victoria said simply. "My grandchildren. They're not—" "Please, don't insult my intelligence. They're the age they would be. The boy looks exactly like Damien at that age. And you've never actually denied it, just deflected." Caitlyn glanced at the twins, making sure they were out of earshot. "What do you want? To understand? Why you never told him? Why you've raised them alone when you could have had support?" "Your support," Caitlyn laughed bitterly. "The same support that left me homeless and jobless while pregnant. The same support that tried to erase me from existence. That was before what? Before I proved I could survive without the mighty Holt family. Before I built something you couldn't destroy. Your approval comes too late, Mrs. Holt. 7 years too late." Victoria was quiet for a moment, watching the twins. Zara was now teaching other children her pirate dance, while Kai helped a smaller child tie their shoes. "They're remarkable," she said softly. "Yes, they are. And they're mine. Damien is leaving Melissa." The words hung in the air between them. Caitlyn absorbed them, then shrugged. "That has nothing to do with me. Doesn't it?" "He's been dead inside for 7 years. Seeing you again, seeing what you've become, what he threw away, it's woken him up. His awakening is not my responsibility." "No," Victoria agreed. "But those children deserve to know their father. They deserve a father who would choose them without hesitation. Damien has already proven he can't do that. People change. Do they have you? Caitlyn challenged. Would you welcome my children born out of wedlock to a woman you despised into your perfect family? Would you introduce them at your country club, include them in your will? Victoria's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, Caitlyn said. Now, if you'll excuse me, my children are waiting. She collected the twins, praising their performances, promising ice cream on the way home. As they walked to the car, Kai looked back. Mommy, that old lady is crying, he said. Caitlyn glanced back to see Victoria Holt standing alone by the school entrance, her perfect composure finally cracked. For a moment, Caitlyn felt a flicker of sympathy. Then Zara tugged her hand, chattering about her pirate adventure, and she remembered what truly mattered. The next 3 years passed in a blur of growth and success. Ramsey Cruises, she'd finally dropped, exclusive experiences, expanded to 20 ships offering educational voyages on every ocean. The company went public with an IPO that valued it at $500 million. Caitlyn retained controlling interest, but was now genuinely, officially wealthy. She bought a house in Brookline, nothing ostentatious, but comfortable with separate bedrooms for the twins, and a home office where she could work while they did homework. She hired a housekeeper, bought a car that didn't require prayers to start, even started a college fund that would ensure the twins could attend any university they chose. But she never forgot where she came from. 10% of company profits went to a foundation supporting single mothers, particularly those escaping abusive relationships or facing homelessness. She hired from women's shelters when possible, giving chances to those who just needed someone to believe in them. The twins flourished. Kai, now 10, was already taking advanced mathematics courses, his quiet intensity reminding her painfully of Damien's focus when he'd been passionate about something. Zara, still the fierce protector, had channeled her energy into competitive swimming and debate team, arguing her points with a lawyer's precision and a pirate's fearlessness. They still didn't have a father, though the questions came more frequently now. Everyone in my class has a dad, Kai said one evening, his homework abandoned as he stared out the window. Even Jimmy, whose parents are divorced. He sees his dad on weekends. Would you want that? Caitlyn asked carefully. To see someone on weekends who wasn't there for the everyday stuff. I don't know, he admitted. Sometimes I think yes. Sometimes I think we're perfect, just us three. We are perfect, Zara interjected, looking up from her book. We don't need anyone else. But Caitlyn could see the longing in Kai's eyes, the questions he was too kind to voice. That night after they were asleep, she stood in her home office looking at the empire she'd built, the awards on the walls, the photos from company milestones. Success had given her everything except the ability to turn back time and make different choices. Her phone rang. Christopher Winters. Have you seen the journal? He asked without preamble. No, why? Holt Industries is in trouble. Damien's divorce got ugly, Melissa took half of everything, and now there are rumors of SEC investigations into some irregular dealings. Stocks down 40%. Caitlyn felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, just nothing. That's unfortunate for them. There's more. Victoria Holt has been quietly buying shares in our company. She owns 8% now, making her one of our largest individual shareholders. Now that got her attention. What? I think she's trying to protect it, or protect something. Either way, she's now part of our board, whether we like it or not. Caitlyn sank into her chair. Victoria Holt owning part of her company. The irony was almost too much. What does she want? Board meeting is Tuesday. I guess we'll find out. Tuesday arrived gray and humid summer storm clouds gathering over Boston Harbor. Caitlyn dressed carefully, a black suit that meant business, her mother's pearls for strength, her hair pulled back severely. If Victoria wanted a fight, she'd get one. But the woman who entered the boardroom looked older than Caitlyn remembered, smaller somehow. She took her seat without fanfare, voted with the majority on routine matters, and said nothing during discussions of expansion plans. It wasn't until the meeting was ending that she spoke. "I'd like to propose a new initiative," Victoria said. "A scholarship program for children of single parents, specifically focusing on maritime education and career development." The board looked to Caitlyn, who kept her expression neutral. "That's an interesting proposal. What kind of investment are you suggesting?" "I'll personally fund the first 5 years, $10 million. Gasps around the table. Linda Chen was the first to recover. "That's extremely generous, Mrs. Holt. What inspired this?" Victoria looked directly at Caitlyn. "Let's say I've recently become aware of how difficult it can be for single parents to provide opportunities for their children. This is my small way of addressing that. We'll take it under advisement," Caitlyn said formally, though her heart was racing. After the meeting, Victoria lingered. Once they were alone, she pulled out an envelope from her bag. "What's this?" Caitlyn asked. "Photographs, documents, everything I had my investigators gather about you 7 years ago, including the pregnancy timeline. Proof if anyone cared to look closely." "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I'm dying," Victoria said simply. "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. And I've realized I'll leave behind a legacy of control and cruelty, of valuing bloodlines over character. The twins, your twins, they're the only good thing to come from my family in generations." Caitlyn stared at the envelope. "What am I supposed to do with this? Oh, whatever you think best. Tell them, don't tell them. Tell Damien, don't tell him. I'm giving you the power I took away 7 years ago, the power to choose." "Why now?" "Because I've watched you for 3 years. Watched you build this empire, raise those children, create something from the nothing we left you with. You're the daughter-in-law I should have welcomed, the mother my grandson should have had. I can't undo the past, but I can at least stop controlling the future." She stood to leave, then paused. "Damien's lost everything. The divorce, the business troubles, he's essentially starting over. Rather poetic, considering that's what he forced you to do." "I don't take pleasure in his downfall." "No, you wouldn't. You're too busy building to waste time on schadenfreude. That's what makes you better than all of us." After Victoria left, Caitlyn sat alone in the boardroom, the envelope heavy in her hands. Inside were photos of her pregnant medical records. Even a DNA test Victoria had somehow managed to conduct, probably from something the twins had touched during the school play. Absolute proof that Damien Holt was the father of her children. She could destroy him with this or save him. She could give her children their father or protect them from disappointment. She had all the power now, just as Victoria said. That evening, she watched the twins at dinner, noticing things she usually tried to ignore. The way Kai held his fork exactly like Damien did. The way Zara's eyes turned the same shade of green when she was plotting something. Nature versus nurture playing out in real time at her kitchen table. "Mom, you're being weird," Zara announced. "Am not." "Are too. You're staring at us like we're science experiments." "Maybe you are," Caitlyn teased. "Maybe I'm secretly observing you for my study on the eating habits of 10-year-old pirates and mathematicians." "Pirates don't have eating habits," Zara corrected. "We have rating patterns." "Of course. My mistake." That night she called James, who'd retired to Florida, but remained her closest advisor and friend. "Victoria Holt gave me proof about the twins' father," she said without preamble. And and I don't know what to do with it. Part of me wants to burn it, pretend it never existed. Part of me thinks the twins deserve the choice when they're older. What does your gut say? That I've protected them this long. Why stop now? There's your answer. But it wasn't that simple. The next week brought news that Holt Industries had filed for bankruptcy protection. Damien had lost everything: the company, the fortune, the name that had meant everything to him, or rather, to his mother. Caitlyn heard through industry contacts that he was selling everything, liquidating assets to pay debts. The Beacon Hill mansion, the vacation homes, the art collection, all going to auction. She told herself she didn't care. Told herself this was justice, karma, the universe balancing scales. But when she heard he was living in a studio apartment in Revere, working as a consultant for a small maritime firm, something in her chest tightened uncomfortably. "You're thinking about him," Christopher observed during a lunch meeting. "I'm thinking about the market implications of Holt Industries' collapse." "Liar." He smiled slightly. "You're too good for revenge, Caitlyn. It's one of your most annoying qualities." "I'm not planning anything." "No, but you're feeling guilty for his downfall, even though you had nothing to do with it." "Didn't I? If I hadn't been at that gala, if he hadn't seen what I'd become, maybe his marriage wouldn't have exploded so spectacularly." His marriage exploded because it was built on lies. His company failed because it was built on ego. None of that is your fault or your responsibility. But responsibility was a funny thing. That weekend, the twins had a swimming competition for Zara and a math Olympiad for Kai. Caitlyn was trying to figure out how to be in two places at once when her phone rang. "Ms. Ramsey, this is Dr. Morrison from Mass General. Victoria Holt listed you as her emergency contact. She's been admitted and is asking for you." Caitlyn found Victoria in a private room, looking small and fragile against the hospital white. The cancer had progressed faster than predicted. "You came," Victoria said, her voice weak but surprised. "You listed me as your emergency contact. Why?" "Because I have no one else. Damien won't come. I burned that bridge when I didn't stand by him during the bankruptcy. Melissa took my grandson to California. I'm dying alone, which is probably what I deserve." "Nobody deserves to die alone." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I do. I destroyed so many lives in the name of family legacy, and now there's no legacy left." "There is," Caitlyn said quietly. "It's just not the one you planned." She stayed for an hour listening as Victoria rambled through memories and regrets. Near the end, Victoria gripped her hand. "The twins. Will you ever tell them about me? I'll tell them there was a woman who made mistakes, but tried to make amends at the end. That's all anyone can ask for, isn't it?" Victoria died 3 days later. Caitlyn attended the funeral standing in the back of a nearly empty church. Damien was there, looking haggard in an ill-fitting suit. A handful of society matrons who'd once competed for Victoria's approval. The grandson, Damien Jr., flew in from California with Melissa, who left immediately after the service. Caitlyn was leaving when Damien caught up with her in the parking lot. "Thank you for coming," he said. I know she was at the hospital at the end. The nurses said someone was with her. Everyone deserves company at the end. Even someone who destroyed your life. My life isn't destroyed. Look around, Damien. I'm standing here in designer clothes, about to drive away in a car I paid cash for to go home to 2 beautiful children and then to run my multi-million-dollar company tomorrow. Does that sound destroyed to you?" He laughed bitterly. "No. It sounds like you won and we lost. This was never a game to me. That's what your family never understood. My family." He looked back at the church. What family? My mother's dead. My son lives across the country with a mother who uses him as a weapon, and I'm alone in a studio apartment, applying for jobs at companies run by people I used to look down on. Self-pity doesn't suit you. Neither does poverty, but here we are. He paused. Can I ask you something? She waited. The twins, are they? Don't, she warned. Don't ask questions you gave up the right to ask 7 years ago. I know I gave up the right. I'm asking anyway. Please, Caitlyn. I need to know. She looked at him, really looked at him. Gone was the golden boy who'd swept her off her feet with promises of forever. This was a broken man, humbled by loss, aged by regret. He looked like what he was, someone who'd chosen wrong and was living with the consequences. What would change if you knew? She asked. Would you suddenly want to be a father? Would you fight for custody with your zero resources? Would you disrupt their happy, stable lives to satisfy your curiosity? No, he admitted. I wouldn't. I couldn't offer them anything right now. I dream about them. The children we might have had. Wonder if they exist somewhere in the world, if they're happy, if they look like you or me or both. Dreams are all you get, she said, not unkindly but firmly. That's all any of us get sometimes. She drove away, leaving him standing in the funeral home parking lot, a figure getting smaller in her rearview mirror, until he disappeared entirely. The twins were waiting when she got home, homework spread across the dining room table, but their attention focused on something else entirely, a newspaper article about Victoria Holt's death. This lady has the same last name as that boy from the cruise, Kai said, looking up as Caitlyn entered. Damien Jr. Was she his grandmother? Yes, Caitlyn said carefully, setting down her purse. The article says she was one of our company's investors. Zara added, always the investigator. Why would someone like her invest in us? Sometimes people invest in companies they believe will succeed, Caitlyn said, moving into the kitchen to avoid their searching gazes. Or sometimes they invest because they feel guilty, Kai said quietly. Caitlyn froze her hand on the refrigerator door. What makes you say that? I don't know, just the way she looked at us that time at the school play. Like she knew us, but we didn't know her. Her brilliant, observant son. Too smart for his own good sometimes. Did you know her mom? Zara asked directly. Before she invested. Caitlyn turned to face them, these two pieces of her heart, who deserved truth, but perhaps not all of it. Not yet. I knew her son once. A long time ago, before you were born. Was he your friend? Kai asked. For a while. What happened? Zara wanted to know. We grew apart. People do that sometimes. The twins exchanged one of their looks, the silent communication that had existed between them since birth. Then Zara shrugged and returned to her homework, while Kai continued to study the newspaper photo of Victoria Holt. That night, Caitlyn found him in his room, staring at his laptop screen. He'd pulled up photos from the Maritime Gala 3 years ago, zooming in on faces in the crowd. What are you doing, sweetheart? He startled quickly, closing the laptop. Nothing. Just research. Research on what? Nothing important. But she saw the questions in his eyes, the pieces he was trying to fit together. Her brilliant boy who noticed everything, who was starting to wonder about the gaps in their family story. The next morning brought a surprise call from her lawyer. Victoria Holt had left something for her in her will, not money, but a collection of photographs and documents. She specified that these should be given to you privately, the lawyer explained, handing over a large envelope. She also left a letter. Caitlyn waited until she was alone in her office to open it. Inside were photos she'd never seen Damien as a child, as a teenager at various ages, that showed exactly what Kai and Zara might look like as they grew. There were also documents, his medical records, family genetic history, everything the twins might need to know for health reasons without revealing the connection. The letter was brief, Caitlyn. I leave you these not as manipulation, but as information. Someday your children may need to know their medical history. Someday they may want to see where half of them comes from. That should be your choice, not mine, but I wanted you to have the tools to make it when the time comes. I was wrong about you. Wrong about what constitutes worthiness. You've proven that strength isn't inherited, it's forged in fire. Your children are lucky to have you. With respect and regret, Victoria Holt, Caitlyn locked everything in her office safe, another secret to carry, another decision deferred. But the universe seemed determined to force the issue. 2 weeks later, Ramsey Cruises announced its biggest expansion, yet the acquisition of 3 luxury vessels that would be converted into floating innovation centers, partnering with tech companies and universities to create think tanks at sea. The press conference was held at the Boston Harbor Hotel. Media from around the world, attending to hear about the billion-dollar initiative. Caitlyn stood at the podium, confident in her navy suit, and the company's projections, fielding questions with ease. She was explaining the educational partnerships when a familiar voice called out from the press pool. Ms. Ramsey, David Chen from the Boston Globe. Your company has grown from nothing to a billion-dollar enterprise in just 7 years. What drives you to keep pushing forward? She looked at the reporter, the same one who'd written the profile about her mysterious rise. My children, she said simply. Everything I do is to show them that anything is possible if you're willing to work for it. Can you tell us about them? They're 10-year-old twins, brilliant, challenging, and the best thing that ever happened to me. And their father. The room seemed to hold its breath. Caitlyn had always deflected this question before, but something about the moment, the success, the security she'd built, the power she now wielded, made her decide to answer. Their father chose not to be part of our lives before they were born. His loss, not ours. Do they ever ask about him? Of course. They're curious, intelligent children. I tell them the truth, that sometimes adults make choices they can't take back, and that they are loved completely by the family they have. Does he know about them? No further questions about my personal life, Caitlyn said firmly. We're here to discuss the future of maritime education, not my past. But the damage was done. The story that ran the next day speculated wildly about the identity of the twins' father, the timing of their birth, the connections to the Holt family that were becoming harder to hide. Damien saw the article in the coffee shop where he was working on consulting proposals, his laptop surrounded by the detritus of a life downsized instant coffee instead of espresso, a sandwich from the corner store instead of a restaurant lunch. He read it 3 times, his heart pounding. Twins. Born 7 years ago. The father who chose not to be involved. He did the math he'd been avoiding for 3 years, and the truth hit him like a physical blow. He abandoned his laptop and actually ran the 6 miles to Caitlyn's office building, arriving breathless and disheveled at the security desk. I need to see Caitlyn Ramsey, he gasped. Do you have an appointment? The guard asked, taking in his sweaty appearance with skepticism. No, but... Then I can't let you up. Ms. Ramsey's schedule is completely booked. Tell her Damien Holt is here. Please, she'll see me. The guard made a call, spoke quietly, then hung up. Ms. Ramsey says she has nothing to discuss with you. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Please, Damien said desperately. Just 5 minutes. I know about the twins. I know. Sir, you need to leave now or I'll call the police. He left, but didn't go far. He waited outside the building until evening, watching employees stream out, hoping to catch her. But Caitlyn must have anticipated this. She never appeared. Finally, as the last lights in the building went out, he admitted defeat. He walked home through streets that had once felt like his kingdom, now just cold pavement under tired feet. The next morning, he did something he'd never imagined. He went to the women's shelter, where Caitlyn had stayed 7 years ago. He didn't know what he expected to find, maybe just understanding of what she'd gone through. The director, a stern woman named Patricia, looked at him with deep suspicion when he introduced himself. "I remember Caitlyn," she said carefully. "Why are you asking about her?" I knew her. Before. I'm trying to understand what happened after." Patricia's expression hardened. "What happened was a pregnant woman with nowhere to go showed up at our door, abandoned by everyone who should have protected her. What happened was she slept in a room with 3 other women while growing 2 babies she couldn't afford to feed. What happened was she still got up every morning and looked for work, even when your family, yes, I know who you are, made sure no one would hire her." Each word was a blade cutting deeper than the last. "She was pregnant," he whispered, "when she came here, 2 months along. Sick as a dog, but still determined to make something of herself. And she did no thanks to you or anyone else with the last name Holt." "Twins," he said numbly. "She had twins. The strongest woman I ever met." Patricia continued, relentless now. "Worked until the day she gave birth, then was back at it 6 weeks later with 2 newborns. Never complained, never asked for more than her share, always helped the other women when she could. You want to know what happened after you abandoned her? She became extraordinary. And you became nothing." He left the shelter and walked to the harbor, standing where he and Caitlyn had once dreamed of sailing away together. The memory felt like it belonged to different people, a weak boy and a trusting girl who'd both had to become someone else. His phone rang. Marcus Chen, his former best man, now a successful attorney. "Damien, I heard about your mother. I'm sorry." "Thanks. Listen, I also heard you've been asking about Caitlyn Ramsey. How did you never mind? This city's too small." "Stop," Marcus said firmly. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, stop. You have no rights here legally or morally. Those children, if they are yours, have been raised without you for 10 years. Caitlyn's built them a good life. Don't destroy that because you're finally ready to face what you did. I just want to see them, to know them. You gave up that right when you left her at the altar, pregnant and penniless. Live with it." The line went dead. Even Marcus, who'd stood by him through everything, had drawn a line. Meanwhile, Caitlyn was dealing with her own crisis. The twins had seen the news, coverage had heard classmates talking, had put pieces together with their brilliant minds. "Are we the twins from the newspaper?" Zara asked at dinner, direct as always. "Yes." "And our father didn't want us." "Your father didn't know about you," Caitlyn said carefully. "I chose not to tell him." Why? Kai asked, his voice small. "Because he'd already shown me he couldn't be relied on. He'd chosen other things over our family before you were born. I didn't want him to have the chance to choose those things over you." "What things?" Zara demanded. "Money, status, his mother's approval." "So he's rich?" Kai asked. "He was. Not anymore." "Is he—" Kai paused, gathering courage. "Is he Damien Holt, the man from the funeral?" Caitlyn's breath caught. Her brilliant, observant boy. "What makes you think that? The timing, the way he looked at you, the way you looked at him, his son on the cruise who looks like me, the fact that his mother invested in our company." "I'm not stupid, Mom." "No," she agreed. You're not stupid. You're brilliant, both of you, and you deserve the truth. She told them then not everything but enough. About meeting Damien, falling in love, the engagement, the abandonment. About choosing to raise them alone rather than risk them being rejected by the Holt family. About building the company to give them the life they deserved. Does he know about us now? Zara asked when she finished. He suspects. He doesn't know for certain. Good, Zara said fiercely. He doesn't deserve to know us. But Kai was quiet, processing with that internal intensity that reminded her so painfully of Damien in his better moments. What are you thinking, baby? She asked. I'm thinking that everyone makes mistakes, he said slowly. And maybe his biggest mistake was losing us. That's very mature of you. I'm still mad at him, Kai clarified. But also curious. Is that wrong? No, sweetheart. It's not wrong to be curious about where you come from. We come from you, Zara interjected. That's all that matters. But Caitlyn could see the questions in both their eyes, the wondering that would only grow with time. The next week brought the annual Ramsey Cruises shareholders meeting held aboard the Discovery as it sailed Boston Harbor. Investors from around the world attended, eager to hear about the company's continued expansion. Caitlyn was in her element, presenting figures that showed 40% growth year over year, announcing partnerships with 3 more universities, revealing plans for an IPO that would value the company at $2 billion. She was answering questions from the floor when she saw him. Damien in the back row, wearing a borrowed suit and holding a single share certificate, the minimum required to attend a shareholders' meeting. Their eyes met across the room, and she saw everything there: regret, longing, desperate hope. She looked away and continued with the presentation, but her voice wavered slightly. Christopher noticed, following her gaze to find the source of her distraction. His expression darkened, and he whispered something to security. The next question, Caitlyn said, trying to regain her composure. Damien stood. My question is, how do you build something from nothing? How do you find the strength to keep going when everyone's against you? The room fell silent, sensing undercurrents they didn't understand. You survive, Caitlyn said evenly. You focus on what matters most. You refuse to let anyone else's limitations become your own. And you never, ever give up. Even when you've lost everything, especially then, because when you've lost everything, you have nothing left to lose and everything to gain. And forgiveness, he asked, his voice breaking slightly. Is there room for that in your business model? Security was moving toward him now, but Caitlyn raised a hand to stop them. Forgiveness is earned, Mr. Holt, not requested. It comes from consistent action over time, not grand gestures or public pleas. And sometimes what people need isn't forgiveness, but the chance to become someone worthy of it. She turned to the rest of the room. Next question. But Damien wasn't done. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need you to know that not a day has passed that I haven't regretted my cowardice. And if they exist, the children I dream about, I need them to know that my failure was never about them. It was only and always about my own weakness. Gasps rippled through the room as people began to understand what they were witnessing. Mr. Holt, Caitlyn said, her voice deadly calm, this is neither the time nor the place for personal discussions. Security, please escort the gentleman out. As security approached, Damien pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box, and set it on the nearest table. This was my grandmother's, he said. The ring I should have put on your finger 7 years ago. I'm not asking you to take it. I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know that I kept it. that I never could let it go, just like I could never let you go. Then he walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence and the ring glittering under the conference room lights. Christopher was the first to recover. Well, that was dramatic. Now back to our financial projections. The meeting continued, but Caitlyn operated on autopilot, her mind spinning. After it ended, as investors mingled on deck, she found herself standing with the ring box in her hand. Inside was the same 3-carat diamond she'd sent back 7 years ago, but now she could see what she'd missed, then an inscription on the band, "For my heart's true home, forever D." Quite a scene, Linda Chen said, joining her at the rail. The press will have a field day. Let them, Caitlyn said, closing the box. It changes nothing. Doesn't it? He's clearly still in love with you. Love isn't enough. It never was. But it's something, Linda pointed out. And that man has nothing else left. No money, no power, no family empire. Just whatever feelings drove him to crash a shareholders' meeting to make that plea. That evening, Caitlyn came home to find the twins doing homework with unusual intensity. What's going on? She asked. Someone posted a video, Kai said quietly, turning his tablet toward her. There it was, Damien's scene at the meeting, already viral with thousands of comments speculating about the story behind it. Is that him? Zara asked. Our father, yes. He kept the ring, Kai observed, for 7 years. A ring is just an object, Caitlyn said. But keeping it means something, Kai insisted. It means he never really let go. Or it means he's dramatic and likes grand gestures, Zara countered. They both looked at their mother expectantly. What do you want me to say? Caitlyn asked. That his keeping a ring makes up for 7 years of absence, that a public scene erases private abandonment. No, Kai said. But maybe we could meet him just once. Absolutely not, Zara said, before Caitlyn could respond. He doesn't deserve to meet us. But what if we deserve to meet him, Kai asked. What if we need to see for ourselves who he is? The twins rarely disagreed on anything important, and watching them split on this broke Caitlyn's heart a little. You're both too young to make this decision, she said. When you're older. We're not too young, Zara interrupted. We're old enough to know he hurt you. Old enough to know he's a coward. People change, Kai said softly. Do they? Zara challenged. Or do they just want what they can't have? That night after the twins were asleep, Caitlyn stood on her balcony with a glass of wine thinking about paths not taken and choices that couldn't be undone. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm leaving Boston tomorrow, moving to Seattle to start over. I won't bother you again. But if someday when they're older you think they might want to know me, I'll be waiting, however long it takes. D. She deleted the message, but the words lingered. However long it takes. The next morning brought chaos. The video had been picked up by major news outlets, the story of the billionaire single mother and the disgraced heir who'd loved and lost her, capturing public imagination. Reporters camped outside both her office and home. Mom, there are people with cameras on our lawn, Zara announced, peering through the curtains. Don't go outside, Caitlyn warned. I'll handle this. She called her head of security, arranged for protection for the twins, then faced the media head-on with a prepared statement. My personal life is not public entertainment. My children are private citizens who deserve to grow up without harassment. Any outlet that approaches them or publishes their images will face immediate legal action. As for Mr. Holt, he is someone from my past who has no bearing on my present or future. That is all I have to say on this matter. But the story wouldn't die. Someone leaked that Damien had worked at the company where Caitlyn had once been a chambermaid. Others found records of their engagement announcement in old society pages. The narrative built itself: poor girl meets rich boy, abandons, poor girl builds empire, while rich boy loses everything. It was a fairy tale in reverse, and the public ate it up. "We're famous," Zara said disgustedly, showing Caitlyn her phone where classmates were sharing news articles. "We're notorious," Caitlyn corrected. "There's a difference, and it will pass." "Will it?" Kai asked. "Or will people always wonder about us now, about him?" The truth was, Caitlyn didn't know. The carefully constructed privacy she'd maintained for 10 years had been shattered by one dramatic moment. Now everyone would be watching, waiting, wondering if the story would have a second act.